So, one of the other things that I always forget to do is say where we are and who we're with. So, we're with Derek Melton, blacksmith. Would you call yourself a blade maker? Blacksmith, blade maker?
Occasional blade maker. Yeah.
Blade maker. A lot of, we've seen a lot of barbecue tools and coffee scoops and sort of like homeware goods, I would suppose, would be the best way
Right,
to
that's what
describe
I've
it.
moved into.
Yeah.
Small. I like to say small items.
Small items, right.
I make keychains, zipper pulls
Oh, yeah.
with custom
Yeah.
stamps,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
I do a lot of small items.
Yeah.
Things
And we're Clinton, just outside west side of
Jackson, Mississippi. Right in the middle of the state.
right in the middle of the state. And this is our first time in Mississippi.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely.
And we've managed to experience all of Mississippi's weather
Yeah.
in the past 8 or 9 hours. So that's been good.
Massive thunderstorm.
Yeah. Yeah. But hey, it is what it is. So, question 1, who is Derek Melton?
Well, if you look on my profile on Instagram, it says I think it says Mississippi blacksmith, Christ following husband, father, IT guy. So that I think that's me in a nutshell.
Okay.
But a craftsman, I guess is
Craftsman.
what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing this?
Metalwork specifically since around 2001. Before that, I did a little woodworking. Grew up
Okay.
around my father. My father was a draftsman, architect,
Okay.
built custom homes. And so I grew up on the job site with him, going to different job sites, working as a carpenter's helper one week and an electrician's helper the next week, a job site cleaner the week after that, you know. And so I was exposed at a really young age to the trades,
Yeah.
and saw that. And then in his spare time, he would make handmade furniture.
Nice.
Right.
And in the late 80s, he got into making wooden briefcases.
Oh, really?
Like
Okay.
hardwood, walnut, maple briefcases, completely out of wood.
They sound awesome.
And really odd niche to be in, but he did that for a while. And so I saw him doing all those things as a kid. And so the idea of making things was it was
Natural.
really natural. Yeah.
How important do you think that was for you to have that exposure early on to having a future like this?
Oh, huge.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've got pictures of me at 3 years old with an electric sander in my hand, sanding a table that my dad was making,
Wow.
And so it's been a part of my life as long as I can remember, but
Yeah.
metal was never a part of his life,
Right.
and unfortunately he passed away right when I was really starting to get into metalwork.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I'm kind of a little sad that he never got to see me come into what I would think my prime as a craftsman
Right.
the way I got to see him.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's a
But
shame.
Bittersweet.
But your kids are watching you doing all
Right.
your cool stuff.
Yeah, they
and
are.
Yeah.
They are.
And would you say now that you feel like this is like your final form as a craftsman, metalwork is your thing, you seem really happy, really well set up in doing this as a craftsman? Forging is where I'm happy. Right.
Yeah. So you ask if I still make blades.
Yeah.
I love to forge a blade. I love the process of forging a knife blade out
Right.
to 85, 90% complete before you take it to a grinder. Once I finish that, I'm kind of done with the knife. I don't really enjoy it as much anymore after that.
Okay.
The grinding aspect, the handle making aspect, once the forging stops, the fun has kind of stopped for me.
Right.
So I make about 2 knives a year now.
Right, okay.
Because there's just not a lot of forging in bladesmithing. It happens pretty quick in bladesmith work, and then the rest of it is a lot of real fine detail finish work, and I'd rather be forging.
Yeah.
So.
I've also noticed the blade industry, certainly back home, maybe you can confirm or deny, it's moved towards the DXF, get it cut, grind it, temper it.
Lots of
make a
machine
handle.
work happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Rather than traditional drawing it all out from bar stock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the knife making world, there's two categories, and this can start an argument quick online. But bladesmithing versus knife making.
Right.
And so they both end up with a knife, but it's how you get there. And so a bladesmith takes a piece of steel and forges it to a shape. A knife maker or a stock removal knife maker will take a piece of steel and grind away everything that's not the shape they want.
Okay.
And in the end, they both get heat treated in similar ways. And so the end product is going to be just as viable and functional as a knife. It's just how you get there is different.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a lot of what's called mid-tech knives where small shops will farm out CNC work to larger shops to get blanks and parts cut, and then they'll do the final assembly in their shop, you know.
Okay, right.
A lot of that happening. And as CNC stuff gets more and more affordable and smaller and better and cheaper, lots and lots of people are doing more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does lower the bar for entry.
Absolutely.
In a big
Yeah.
way, which personally I think is a great thing. Like, the lower the bar is for entry, the more people can get into it, and then the ones that really want to be into it will stick at it. It just
Right.
gives someone else a chance to get into it. And it's interesting what you say about it can start an argument online. Aside from the fact anything seems to start an argument online these days,
True.
That's so true.
there's place for both of it. You know, and there's place for, you know, and I want to go on to speak about your method of forging in a minute. There's place for everyone in the craft space to do their own thing. You know, historically you would go to certain people because they done it that way.
Right.
Then you would go to somebody else because they done something else that way. That's all you're doing now. It's just there's
Right.
more tech available.
Yeah.
So your shops, first off, fascinating. Would like it. What's the price tag? Do you know? But you've got a really good mix of old school and new school here. Do you think that suits you as a maker, or is it just that's by way of circumstance with the space, or is that what you've always strived for? How's that come about?
It's part of my nature too, because my full-time job is in information technology.
Right.
You know, I'm working in complex virtualization systems for a large hospital.
Right.
You know, I'm making sure that virtualized Windows machines are available for clinicians in a hospital setting. Real high-tech stuff, you know. And so I have grown up in the computer world since it started. You know, got a Commodore 64 when I was 12 or 13 years old, and I've had computers since. And so I've been around all kinds of high technology my entire life. And so when I got into the metalworking side of things, it was completely natural for me to look for the high-tech stuff, but I also really enjoy the old school stuff. You know, I've got some tools in here that are 100+ years old that I wouldn't replace for anything, and then I'm mixing those with, you know, high-tech induction and brand new technology, inverter welder machines and things, and I'm using a lot of 3D printing too in my prototyping for products. You know, I'll 3D print a product first just to see if I like the way it feels in my hand, and then I'll send that off. I might send it off to somewhere to have it CNC cut, so I get a version of it in steel, you know, or cast, you know. And so I see no problem mixing the old and the new technology. And really, if you look at blacksmiths as a profession throughout history, they were often the first people to adopt new technologies to make their job easier. You know?
Okay.
That's
And
interesting.
so I'm not very aware of that. What's the sort of examples of that? Just the way.
Well,
they've
welding.
approached
You know,
Yeah.
when welding
Yeah.
technologies came along, I think blacksmiths were some of the first people to jump onto incorporating that into their work, where for years, centuries, they'd been forge welding only, you know, and then here comes this machine along that they can just touch two pieces of metal together rather than, you know, spending all this time. And there's reasons to continue to forge weld and, you know, for artistic purposes, but
Yeah.
that's just one example. Power hammers are another example.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
when power hammers came along, blacksmiths, well, I think blacksmiths were the ones that invented the power hammers. You know, they invented the machines to make their bodies last longer, so they weren't wearing themselves out, at the anvil all the time. They invented power hammers to make their job easier and to make it more profitable. So
it's very physical.
I think
work.
if you
That's
took a
very-
blacksmith from 1820 and dropped him into my shop, he would feel right at home with some of the tools and probably be really curious about others, about how does that work? And then once they saw the efficiency, I think they would be all about it. I don't think they would have any qualms about whether or not it was considered cheating or not.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I'd like to touch on with you is you mentioned this is a part-time thing for you, and we talked a little bit about it earlier. Like, if you were a traditional coal forge, it's got a sexy allure about it. But if you were a traditional coal forge, this wouldn't be feasible as a part-time enterprise.
Oh no, I couldn't turn out half the products that I turn out if I tried to stick to traditional methods. My prices would go way up because of the time involved. My time would go way up, and my output would go way down.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off.
Yeah. And a trade-off that you seem to have worked specifically to suit you.
Right.
And your craft.
Exactly.
You've got to have a balance. as
Exactly.
well.
Yeah. Was it always like that? How long did it get you to? Because it seems really efficient now.
So I started the formal business, I think 4 years ago now. Before that, it was purely hobby. And I was making money on the side, as the hobby, strictly just to buy tools. If I wanted a tool, I'd make a few things and try to buy the tool that way. Really, the appearance on Forged in Fire kind of pushed me to actually establish a business, just because the social media exposure was out there kind of really quickly, and it was strike while the iron's hot kind of a scenario, take advantage. And so I did that to just try to take advantage and get more exposure, to try to sell more things. And I realized pretty quickly, I need to separate this from a financial standpoint, just to make it a little cleaner, financially speaking. And then also to just start establishing it as a business and as a business name, in the hopes that in the future it becomes, a substantial form of side income.
Do you ever view it as something that you would like it to be full-time? And what would that take for that to be?
And I think everybody that does it, whether they're in a hobby or a part-time business, they think about that quite a lot. What would it be like if I went full-time? And, right now the reality is I've got 2 kids. One's in college, one's about to be in college. So, and then I'm still really enjoying my career in IT.
That's good.
I've been in that. I've been in that for a long time, and I'm part of a really good team at a really good hospital now, and I enjoy what I do there. So I don't see a reason to stop that. And I've set the business up so that I can be as busy as I want to be. And not be overwhelmed. So the really nice part of that is, if something did happen to my full-time job, if the hospital burned down and I didn't have a job, I could pretty quickly ramp things up and I think move in that direction to go full-time. But I'm also I want to be really careful about not ruining the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, that's true. You're enjoying what
that's
you're
a difficult balance.
I'm not convinced that everybody that goes full-time instantly dislikes what they're doing, but you do hear that a lot. You hear, or at least I've heard that, especially from knife makers that have gone full-time. It becomes a grind and they're not enjoying it as much anymore, and it used to be kind of a passion, but now it's a have-to kind of thing. And
as soon as there's a financial reliance on something, it changes shape, doesn't it?
And so right now it's not a have-to thing for me, so I enjoy every minute of it.
That's a really nice position to be in from. Well, it's a really nice position to be in your full-time work, first off, to be enjoying it and to be with a great team. But to also be enjoying just doing, like, to not want to force this into full time. That's
Right.
quite important. You clearly don't want to force this into a full time position, because one, it doesn't need to be there.
Right.
But that must allow you a lot of scope to develop things, to try new things. You know, if you were under the cosh every week where it was like, well, I need to make this amount, you could quite easily get trapped and be
Yeah,
a manufacturer rather
absolutely.
than a maker.
Yeah, it reduces the amount of time you have to be creative in a new product kind of way, you know. So over the last couple of years, as I've changed out some of the tooling to be more efficient, that's also changed what I sell on the website.
Yeah.
You know, based on, you know, it just does. Since this is a part-time thing and I'm doing it in my part-time, then I want my products to be high quality, fun for me to make. I want to have fun while I'm making them, and then two, something I can make fairly quickly. You know, and so over the past 3 years, I've whittled away the things that didn't fit in that criteria. You know.
Okay. And what does the product lineup look like now? And what's driven that as a lineup?
So most of my product lineup now is driven by the induction forge. You know, it's driven by what products and materials I can heat using induction heating versus having to use coal or propane, you know. And so most of my products are the barbecue tools, coffee scoops, keychains, necklaces, lots of little small stuff. I sell some leather workers weights. You know, leather workers use weights to hold down their leather as they,
As a crack on,
Yeah.
yeah.
you know, a lot of times they use these beanbag kind of
Yep.
things
For
to lay
venues.
it down. And I've started making 2 or 3 pound steel weights that are all rounded and soft on the edges so they don't mark up the leather.
Yep.
So I've started selling those. Tools to other blacksmiths is another thing. You know,
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the tools? I was really impressed. Like, I love the idea of being able to design tools, and I love the fact that tools have come from necessity. Because I think tool design's one of those things that you cannot do it unless you've walked in those shoes.
Right.
So that's, like, there's a lot of people that will like jump in and, oh well, I'm going to design the next big whatever it is. You know, Martinez Tools in the US would probably be one of the more prolific tool makers that I know of, who makes really good quality hammers. But I think, and speed squares and like joinery equipment for people manufacturing houses and you know, timber framers. But I think he was like 30, 40 years time served as a framer. And that's really important to be able to do good tools. Do you want to talk a
Sure.
little bit about the tools that you do? 'Cause I was really impressed by it.
So yeah, I thought 2 tools that I've kind of developed is the swage block, the small swage block, and the railroad spike twisting tool. And of course I've made other traditional tools, tongs and hammers of all different shapes and sizes. I've kind of backed off of the hammer making because that takes propane or coal to really heat that large chunk of material, and it's not as time efficient. You know, in the time that I can make one hammer, I can make 4 or 5 grilling tools.
Okay.
And so I still make those kind of tools, hammers and tongs on occasion, but I'm starting to focus on tools that I've come up with to help me in my work. And I think, hey, if it helped me, maybe it's going to help another craftsman out there. And so the twisting tool was one where I fabricated the first version out of probably 10 different pieces of material. And then the most recent versions I've made, I'm using a piece of machined steel welded to that bar. And so it goes together a lot quicker.
Yep.
I can make them faster, sell them quicker, you know, that kind of thing. But that came out of me twisting, you know, 2,000 railroad spikes in a few years and realizing that there's got to be a better, more accurate way to do this. And so I came up with my own funky looking tool and then realized, hey, I can make this. And it turned out to be something that people like. And then the swage block was a similar project. I was using a rather large swage block.
So quickly, before we get too into it, explain to people what a swage block is.
Sure. So a swage block is literally a block of steel, sometimes very large, you know, hundreds of pounds down to tens of pounds. And they're blocks that either have forms pressed into them so that you can make scoops or spoons where you swage the material or form the material into the form of the block, or they have holes through them of various sizes and shapes so that as you are punching a hole through material, say to put a hammer handle into a chunk of steel that's going to be a hammer head, you need to be able to pass a tool through that hole. And so you need a surface that has a hole in it so that you can pass the drift that goes into the block and then through your material and then down through the swage block. And so I was using a swage block that was dedicated for just swage forms but no pass-through holes in it.
Yep.
And so I thought that it would be interesting. I had a lot of people ask me who wanted to make the same kind of scoops I was making. They asked me where I got my swage block. And because that swage block was several $100s, you know, if you get somebody that's a hobbyist that just wants to make a coffee scoop or two as a Christmas present, they're not going to want to go spend $300, you know, for a one-off project.
And understandably so.
Sure, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I came up with the idea of making a small mobile swage block that you could move around the shop to different tools, and also had the dual purpose of pass-through holes and swage forms in it. So I made it specifically for scoops. It's got perfectly round, deep holes or deep swage forms for scoops, and then it also has the common round and square holes for drifting through. And I made it in a 12-pound 5x5 block that could be moved around the shop real easy, but also I could ship real easy. And so those fit in the same box that I ship all the rest of my products in. So I didn't have to think when it comes to all the nuance around shipping, you know, the boxes and methods and cost and all that.
Cool.
It's the same price.
Sensible.
It cost me the same price to ship that swage block that it does to ship a barbecue steak turner, you know.
Because you're paying by volume, not by weight.
Right.
Yeah, so that's sensible from a business point of view, isn't it? And that's something that maybe makers listen to this. That seems to be the way you've built your whole product lineup. You know, you've dropped off a couple of the bigger products.
Yeah, what fits in the box? That drives a lot of my product design and elimination of things I will or won't make. Is will it fit in this priority mail box? Because I know how that is going to cost. You know, to ship. And so here in the US, I do free shipping, you know, because I have a really good idea of what my shipping costs are for anything I make. And so I just build that into the price of the item, and it makes it easy for me. And it is a nice thing. I think I'm more likely when I go shopping online, if something's free shipping, you know, I'm more likely to buy it, even if I know that I'm paying $5 to $10 more for the item.
This is what we've talked a lot
It's
about.
funny how the mind works.
Yeah, it's funny, but it works. It simplifies everything.
Well, that's it. So we give a penny accurate price on what the shipping is. It's like what we charge for shipping on our website is the exact calculation from the fulfillment service for shipping it. And we have a massive drop off because people see the shipping price.
Sure.
But if you just dump that in as part of the product cost, it's free shipping, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's free. Nothing. We all know nothing's ever free, and you pay for it somewhere.
Oh yeah.
But because it appears free.
It's in the U.S. It's tax time here, and so I've got to get my tax info together for the business. And last year, I think I paid well over $6,000 in shipping costs. You know, that I paid for. But obviously, those costs are passed on to the customer. But I don't have to worry about going and doing an exact calculation. You know, what is this going to cost? Because that's time too. If I have to go in and put something on a scale and put their address in and then see how much it's going to cost and then communicate back to them, hey, it's going to cost you $7.27 to ship, you know, that just kills the efficiency.
Yeah, and it goes back to that's time that you can't spend doing this.
Right.
And making the products, isn't it?
Right.
How do you find, How do you find Mississippi and how do you find the States for a small side business like this?
I think Mississippi is a good place for small business. There are a ton of small businesses in Mississippi, and there's a lot of home businesses like this. You know, in Mississippi in particular, you know, there's a lot of backyard businesses around. They're hairdressers, for example. People will have a hair salon in their backyard, you know, and serve a given area, you know, and that's just a one-off example, but it's friendly for that kind of environment, you know. The tax code for that is pretty simple. That Mississippi has a website dedicated to small business. I go online once a month and pay my local Mississippi taxes for products I sell in the state.
That's fab.
You know, so yeah, they make it pretty easy.
That must be encouraging to know that you're in a state that supports that kind of thing.
Right.
And being in the US in general, do you think it is really the land of opportunity for small business the way it's portrayed?
In the makerspace, for sure. I think so.
That's what we're realizing in the time we're here.
Yeah, I think, and you know, we alluded to this in a prior conversation offline about there's a resurgence, especially in the U.S., in hand making or making things by hand in all kinds of areas: leatherwork, woodwork, baking, you know, you name it, home brewing, whatever it is. There's this resurgence of people wanting to do things by hand, and I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that the U.S. has pushed so much of that out of the country for so long, and that everybody's been, like me, working in a computer job for years and years, and they're finally just at the point where they just want to make something by hand, you know, because there's a satisfaction that comes with that you don't get, you know. Not, I like my job, my full-time job, what I do, but you know, if I spend all week at my full-time job creating applications or publishing applications out, I can kind of see the progress by the things that I check off of a list that got done. But there's no product at the end of the week that I hold in my hand in an IT job, you know. And so there's just something that comes from making things by your hands, where you take the raw material and then you have this thing at the end. And you're like, hey, I made that. I did that. And I think there's a hunger for that across the country, you know, in all different areas of making. And it's encouraging, you know, it's really neat.
Is there a good community that surrounds the making here specifically? Well, in the US in general, there seems to be a lot of great conventions and community, like Blade Show that's on, just finished in Fort Worth, I think, and there's another one soon in Atlanta.
Right.
There seems to be a lot of good, whatever your niche is, there seems to be a community that surrounds it in the US. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's even the blacksmith community in Mississippi. There's an organization here. They're actually meeting today at the Agriculture Museum in Jackson. There's a full-fledged blacksmith shop, and once a month we get together and show each other what we're working on and demonstrate different things.
So cool.
While we're working in that building, right across the street from us at the same place, there's a wood turning group.
No way, really?
That's meeting. Yeah, the Mississippi Wood Turners are there. There's a beekeeping group that meets up there too. And so, there's the obvious social media communities, you know, where you get in and you kind of group around each other, but there's definitely state and local communities as well. In the blacksmithing arena, it's really formed around an organization called ABANA, A-B-A-N-A, which is the Artist Blacksmith Association of North America. That's the American association, and then each state has a chapter for ABANA. Okay. And so the Mississippi Forge Council is the ABANA chapter in Mississippi.
I like that.
And then I think once every 3 to 5 years, the countrywide ABANA organization has a big meeting, you know, where all the state chapters send people, and it's a big, huge conference. And so, so every craft in the U.S., handcraft, has some kind of council or organization like that, and probably has some kind of convention around it too. You know,
that's really important for development and growth within these small industries, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you think having things like that makes it more accessible for younger people that want to get into it as well? You know, does that then create a resource dump for people to go to?
I think so, and I think because most young people now are social media savvy, you know, they probably discover it on social media and then get plugged in to the actual, you know, council or organization, you know, after that. And so
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's been a big thing. Like, you know, my daughter is really into the culinary arts and baking.
Yep.
And, you know, a lot of what she's following on TikTok are people that are doing cool stuff in the baking community, you know. And so, and then she got involved in, you know, a local Mississippi skills group through the school.
Cool.
And so she's in both worlds too.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that we always talk about it on the podcast, so now's the chance to do it. The social media thing, like it or loathe it, it's there. It's there to stay. And for people just getting, like, dipping an eye in it or just physically seeing other people do it, it's fantastic in the maker space. It's fab.
Inspiring.
Like, well, we find 99% of the people, maybe 92, 93% of the people that we speak to have either found us through Facebook, or not through Facebook, through Instagram,
Facebook,
or vice versa. We found them through Instagram. Instagram seems to be your primary platform. You've got a very good following for it on there. How do you find the Instagram landscape of past and present?
I don't know really. I think community engagement and interaction is why I like Instagram better than other platforms. You know, I don't get the same kind of engagement on TikTok as I do on Instagram. It feels closer on Instagram for some reason.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so that's kind of where I tend to spend my time. I don't have a whole lot of time to focus on pushing material to social media. So out of all the platforms that are available, I've had to kind of choose one. And Instagram just is the one that I like the most. And so I've kind of focused on that. But I can distinctly remember just a few years ago not understanding what a story was supposed to be. Yeah. So I was watching other makers do story posts, and I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I understood posting something to your grid, but I just didn't understand
like, why do you have a story as well?
Yeah, I didn't understand the concept of story. I thought it was kind of silly, to be honest. I was like, why are they doing this? And then all of a sudden I understood it as this is how I just show my day-to-day what I'm doing and how I'm doing. And so for me, Instagram stories for me this is how I share as a maker with other people that are interested in what I'm doing. You want to see how I've got a tool set up, I'm going to show you, you know, or you want to see how I'm making something, I'm going to show you through the stories.
Hey, buddy.
And so, yeah, sorry, we got a
No, that's okay.
canine interrupter.
That's all right. They're always allowed.
Yeah.
But, you know, stories has become more important to me on Instagram than anything else. It's where I kind of feel like I'm able to be helpful.
Right.
You know? And so
that's your community to community aspect. Yeah, that makes sense. And what I kind of like about the stories is it is raw and uncut.
Right.
You know, you can just point a camera at it and be like,
it's quick.
This is what I'm doing now. Yeah, quick, done.
That's what I like about it. I don't have to worry about editing a lot on the stories. I don't have to worry, am I putting enough effort into it? I just turn the camera on and off, and that's pretty much it. And I like that about it. You know.
And you like your lives as well. How do you find them? How do you find
I do the lives generally when I'm working on a process where I know I'm not going to be moving around the shop a lot. You know, if I'm moving between here and power hammers and all over the shop, lives don't seem to make a lot of sense. But if I'm standing at the workbench over there sanding something, you know, I feel like, hey, it's a good time to talk to people.
Yeah.
And just turn the camera on and see what people are up to and take questions and sometimes it's a way for me to kind of sound off on things that are irritating me about social media, you know.
Yeah. And it's a great way to not be alone in your shop.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Everyone's super alone in their shop when they're a one-man band.
Yeah.
And you know, like Ben's probably the most prolific live maker that I know, certainly, you know, the saddle maker Ben Geisler. And having spent a few days with him there, they're great. They're fantastic people. What you see on live is exactly who he is. You know, just a nice guy, you know, very well self-educated, very well spoken, just loving what he does. And the live kind of breaks down that filtered Instagram. That's what I like about stories in live. It breaks down that everything needs to be double filtered,
polished and edited super.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did it really kick up for you? Has it been slow, constant growth, or was there a big kick up? Because you had the Forged in Fire thing, didn't you?
Tell us more about
I've
that.
had, I think I've had 3 periods of really noticeable account growth on Instagram. The first one obviously was Forged in Fire.
Yeah.
You know, you go on TV and people see you and they seek you out, and that happens. And so that was probably 10 to 20K. On Instagram was the Forged in Fire. And then sometime after that, I started paying attention to the analytics. You know, and before that, I had not been paying attention to analytics. And analytics on social media will tell you what your audience likes and what they don't like. And so I just started real simply looking at the things I was posting. And the things that were getting more views than others, I started making more things like that. You know, I said, okay, well, people want to see more about this particular subject. All right, well, I'll show more of that. And so when I started paying attention, then I had another run up to probably 40 or so thousand. And then Instagram Reels hit. And I didn't do a lot with Reels, and then I went down a rabbit hole one day on YouTube watching what makes good Reels, you know, just trying to learn a little bit more about the Reels platform.
Yeah.
And I started paying attention to my Reels analytics, and I made one video, and it was a start to finish where I walked through the process of making an item. You know, it was a stake turner, but I showed every step of the way to some catchy music that was trending at the time. Millions and millions and millions of views on that one video. Yeah, it went mega viral.
That's cool.
Mega viral. I haven't looked lately. The last I looked, it was like way past 30 million views. That one video did another jump in following, like a massive jump. Went from 40K to 80K in about a month.
Wow.
Just like super, super massive. And so initially I thought, oh, well, this is great, you know, but all these people who followed me for that one video are going to see that I'm not making those videos all the time, and they're going to drop off.
Right.
And I did. And so it went up, and then I had a little dip, and then it slowly grew back up to where it was previous. And so I think I'm still on an upward trend. But to be honest, I don't pay attention to that a whole lot. I can tell you why it happened, but I'm not actively seeking out things to do. Oh, I got to get to 100K, or I got to get to 200K. You know, what can I do next to hit that next big number? I'm not worried about that. I am somewhat wanting to pay attention to what works and what doesn't work, because it feels like if I'm posting something out there and nobody's looking at it, then what's the point?
Yep.
You know, I don't need to do that. If nobody wants to see that, then I shouldn't do that.
Well, it's just bad business, isn't it?
Right.
Why would you spend time doing something that nobody notices?
Yeah,
You
and
wanna
I
spend time.
think I've been point blank and upfront about that, about my use of social media, especially in my podcast, where I talk about this a good bit. Is that social media is how you are going to get business done, and I am 100% using social media to sell you things. I want you to buy the things I'm making. And so that's why I'm super active on social media.
Yep.
And I want to be helpful while I do that. But let's all be honest. If we're running a small business and we're not trying to use social media to sell our stuff, it's a waste of your time.
Yep.
You know, and so I think as long as you're upfront about that, then people respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't like. We use social media to share other makers, and by sharing other makers, people come to us and buy our book because the book shares other makers. You know,
Right.
That's the reality of business. We could go and spend money on ads somewhere that might not hit, but with social media, you've got such a good opportunity to hone in on people that do like your stuff. You've got this opportunity to just be like, well, that's my tribe, and I'm just going to hone in on it.
Right.
What did your e-commerce and your sales look like with those jumps? Did they also
They all followed the trend. Yeah, they
Yeah?
would go up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, but the way I have my business set up, I control how busy I am, and so by changing the number of stock level, changing the stock level for given products. You know, there are some products where I keep the stock numbers fairly high because they only take a few minutes for me to make. There are some products that take 45 minutes to an hour to make, and I'll keep those down so that I don't wake up one morning and I'm overwhelmed with somebody that wanted 100 of them for some office party or something, you know.
Yeah.
And so I don't get overwhelmed. I control that, but I have definitely seen, I can see a direct correlation between social media growth and business sales. 100%.
Right.
They track together.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why it's crucial to use social media to do that, you know. And I find it, sorry, the dogs are barking.
That's all right.
like
You won't
crazy.
hear it through this. This will cancel
But-
it out. It's unbelievable.
I find it crazy that in 2023, I still see people who publicly say that they don't want to use social media, you know, to sell their stuff, or they dislike it, in which I can kind of understand the negative aspects of using social media. You could get into arguments and things like that online, but it's how business gets done. And a perfect example of that right now is the blue check on Instagram.
We were talking about this just this morning, yeah.
Right. And so Instagram has just now changed their verified program to a subscription so that anybody can get it, which is great. And I'm already seeing, I've seen story updates today from people saying, I'm not going to pay for that, which is fine. It's totally fine if you don't want to. But if it's true that you're going to get increased engagement or increased views by doing that, that is going to, if you're selling things, that is going to be a direct correlation in your business.
It's just an ad spend.
Exactly. That's the way I look at it. It's
from what
like
we were reading last night, you then get the support with making sure you don't end up with fake accounts imitating you, like all of these things. It's a business tool.
Yeah.
Long and short of it, Instagram is a business tool. It is now a pay-to-play enterprise. I think anyone that thought a platform as powerful as that for business would always be free was maybe being a bit naive.
Right.
Because ultimately it is the platform at the moment to get stuff out quickly.
Especially for makers. I think Instagram is still the place for creatives, you know, for crafting. I think some of these other platforms, TikTok and maybe YouTube Shorts, are more
Get
geared
lost in the
towards
other...
media creators,
Yes.
you know, but people that are making things by hands, creatives, artists, you know, I think Instagram is still, you know, because its roots were a photography app, which was geared around photography of people making things a lot of times. And so I think there's still a large part of the base that's on Instagram is there because it was a creative's space to begin with. And so you're right. It's pay to play, and there's an element of that now that's kind of distasteful, but I think ad spend is a good phrase that you used.
Yeah.
Look at it as you would an ad spend. And if the $15 a month shows me a month from now that I am getting more increased views, then I'm all in on it. If a month or two from now, if I look at the analytics and I'm not seeing any increased engagement, then I might pull off of it. You know, I might just save the $15, but
Yeah.
it's
without
$15,
trying it,
you know, you're talking
without
about
trying it, how would you ever know?
right. If I run down the street and go grab lunch now, it's going to be $15.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
stay home and eat a sandwich one day, and there's your blue check.
Yeah, exactly. There's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And what about the Forged in Fire stuff? So how did that all come about? What was that like as an experience for you? So we get it a little bit back home. If you've got Sky History, you can watch. They're usually back episodes and stuff. But it's huge here, isn't it? It's a big show.
Yeah, they're starting season 10 now.
Wow.
So I don't know if that translates to 10 years. I think it's like 8 years because some of the seasons have overlapped in years. But my first introduction into metalwork was in bladesmithing.
Right.
In 2001. The first thing I ever did with metal was making knives. And so I went down that road for several years making knives, and did it off and on over the years until Forged in Fire came out. And, we were sitting at home as a family, and this show comes on, and I was like, hey, check this out. It's a TV show about the hobby that I've been in for years. How cool is that? And of course my kids are like, you need to try that. You need to go on. And so I tried in season 2. I applied to go on and didn't make it.
Right.
I went through the whole process, the interviews and all that, and didn't make it, and kind of put it out of my head and didn't think about it for a while. And then I got an email from that same group of producers when season 5 was getting ready to start airing or shooting. They sent me an email and said, hey, are you still interested in coming on the show? And so I thought, well, sure. And so I went through the process again and made it on the show this time. And we filmed in April of 18 and it aired in July.
Nice.
So
was it a good experience?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, winning helps.
Yeah.
If you win the show, it's a better experience, obviously.
Yeah.
But almost everybody that I know, regardless of whether they win or not, almost everybody has a good experience, because it's a microcosm of a maker community on the show. Because if you watch the show, almost always you see guys and girls helping each other out. Somebody gets in a tight spot, somebody will come over and help, and that it mirrors a lot of the attitude in the blade making community, and that most makers are just super willing to help. And so I was really encouraged to see that aspect, and that makes the show enjoyable for those people who don't make it all the way to the end. And to be honest, there's a lot of luck. Whole lot of luck involved.
Right.
I could have easily gone out in round 1 from just a silly mistake. And some of the best knife makers in the country have gone on the show and gone home in round 1.
Okay.
So it's not really I wouldn't call the show a true test of a person's capability.
Yep.
It's like any competition, really, though. It's just
it's a game show, really.
Yeah.
It is a game show.
Yeah.
If you could, for people that haven't seen it, because I've watched it, it's not just go make a knife though, is it? There's always they're like from car parts or from, there's always a little twist.
So as I understand it, the people that came up with the idea for the show were big fans of a TV show called Chopped.
Right.
And Chopped is on the Food Network, and it was one of these shows where you would have 4 chefs lined up and a mystery box in front of the chef, and they'd pull the cover off the box, and there'd be a jar of peanut butter and some squid and a biscuit, and they would say, make us something from this conglomeration. And the chef that made the nicest dish out of those odd ingredients was the one that would advance to the next round. And so the Forged in Fire experience was modeled after that. And so you get 4 bladesmiths that stand in front of an anvil with a cover on the anvil, and they have to pull the cover off, and there's some mystery bit of metal, and they have to figure out how to forge that into a knife or combine it with other things to forge into a knife. Or sometimes they have to cut the leaf springs off of a motorcycle or a car, to get their steel. And then they progress to the next round until you get to the last 2 guys, and those 2 guys go home to make some weapon, usually of some historical significance.
Yeah.
And then they beat those weapons to death, and whoever has the weapon that survives the tests is crowned the champ. So.
And you do that in your home shop using whatever material you want, don't you? All you have to do is make the weapon of, whether it's historical reference or like conceptual, whatever the category of weapon or whatever the example type is, you need to make your version of it.
That's
but
right.
You're allowed to make it in your entire style, aren't you?
Pretty much. Yeah. So they reveal an example weapon, and they say you need to go home and make this weapon, and they show you one. You're not allowed to touch it or feel it, but you're just allowed to look at it, and then they send you home. When I was on the show, they sent us home with a spec sheet. Mm-hmm. And the spec sheet had drawings of what we were supposed to make, and it had some things that were on there that were written in red that were absolute requirements, like the length, the weight, those kinds of things. There were some parameters that they were like, you absolutely have to do this.
Yeah.
And they sent us home. They actually gave us a piece of spring steel to use if we wanted to. And then when I was on the show, they gave us a $250 allotment to buy materials if we needed it. And so, you get some materials, but you're required to kind of make that thing.
Right. Well, did you have what episode? It was season.
So I was season 5, episode 20, and we were assigned a small sword, and so I had to make it was technically a 17th century French small sword, like a rapier.
Okay.
And back then they were doing a lot of episodes based around TV shows and stuff.
Right.
And so my episode was the Game of Thrones themed episode, and so ours was based off of Arya's needle. If you ever watched Game of Thrones, the little sword that Arya used.
It's like a fencing sword kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we had to make.
Do you still have it?
No, if you win, they keep it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So they must have an arsenal of blades.
They've got
somewhere.
a trailer load full of weapons at this point somewhere. Yeah.
But you speak very highly of it, so it was a good experience for you.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Making community exposure point of view, would you say all round it was?
Yeah, they treated us really well on the show, and I was impressed at the time with how concerned they were with rules and fairness.
Oh, good.
They stopped rolling the cameras at several times and just said, "Do you understand the parameters for this round? Do you understand everything that is or isn't allowed? And you are not allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to do that. Is everybody on the same page?" And they would, so I was impressed that it was not a lot of made up drama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was actually the real deal on the telly.
Yeah. Like having watched a few of them, it's not massively drama. Like there's always a bit of music when someone's right up against it. Like,
right.
It's a TV show, there has to be. Again, you'd be naive to think there wasn't. But it's pretty drama-free by comparison to a lot of modern shows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be really authentic. The judges are all like historical weapons dealers or I can't remember any of their names. Well, Doug Mike Carter, he's like a hardcore blade guy, isn't he?
Right. Yeah. Martial artist and edged weapon specialist. Yeah. And just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Just super nice. They were all super, super nice people.
That's good.
Really gracious, just top notch.
What did that do for you as a maker?
So the show puts you in a position where you're uncomfortable, and it puts you in a position where you're forced to make something you may not have made before in a time frame that you've never done it in before. So it puts you in this pressure cooker, for a little while, which some people do real well in and some people don't, but the whole experience taught me was you need to push outside your comfort zone more often, because I came away from that thinking, man, I made a functional, good-looking sword that passed some pretty rigorous tests in 48 hours. I had 4 days, 8 hours or 10 hours a day, and then 8 hours on the 5th day. So I had 48 total hours to make that sword, and so I came away with that going, man, I made that in that short period of time under that pressure, and it worked. And yet you know, in my home shop when I was just doing my own thing, I was kind of sticking to the stuff that I was really comfortable with. You
Right.
know? And so it pushed me to want to try new things, try more complex stuff, try to do more volume, you know, of things. And so it helped me grow personally as a maker.
Give you some confidence.
that's
I
good.
can do that.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
have
It was
to.
a big confidence boost for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, with regards to mass exposure forging, there's not anything else out there like that, is there? That would be the biggest one.
Yeah, and there's been some controversy, obviously, in the blade making community over whether or not forged in fire is a good thing for the craft or not.
Okay.
You know, some people, some of the traditionalists that have been doing it for a long time, you know, I think maybe there was this feeling that their craft wasn't as special anymore because it was blown open to everybody. Everybody knew about it and everybody was wanting to try it. And so I think there was a little gatekeeping that was happening in some parts of the community. There were some people that were looking down on people that had gone onto the show like, well, I'm not going to go on the show. You know, I don't need to do that, you know, that kind of thing, which is, I kind of understand where they're coming from. But there's no question that it's been a net positive for the
Awareness.
bladesmithing community from an awareness perspective. Blade Show probably experienced a good bit of growth from that, just from the people that became fans of the show, not only may have wanted to try their hands at making, but then became collectors of other kinds of blades as a result, you know. And so I think it's hard to argue at this point.
Yeah, you see
Whether-
that show and then you see that there's a blade show in a week or 2 weeks or a month's time.
Right.
You're going to go, if you enjoyed the show, it's like, oh, well, I can go and see a lot of this
Exactly,
work
yeah.
in person.
Yeah.
You said that you kind of understand the negativity towards it. Personally, I don't understand it. That's my views. What do you think why do you think there was negativity towards it? Like because that gatekeeping thing's a really dangerous thing for crafts to just die.
Yeah, I think some people were putting a bit too much emphasis on whether or not the show was properly instructing in bladesmithing. Like sometimes on that show, you'll see some pretty odd methods of doing things
Yeah.
that really aren't the right way to do it,
Right.
traditionally speaking, you know. And so I think there was a concern that anybody can make a knife in 3 hours. You know what I mean? Because the show is designed to show that you have a clock that starts and 3 hours later you've got a blade, you know, forged out. When in reality, it might take a lot longer than that, you
Yeah,
know.
of course.
And you're under this time. And so if you just watch the show and you see these people make a knife that passes all these tests in 3 hours, and then you go and you want to order a handmade knife and that knife costs $1,100. And you as a viewer go, why is this knife costing $1,100 when it only took them 3 hours to make? You know, there's this naive idea that I think the show might have promoted because it was showing all their years of experience and all that stuff in a really crunch time period. And so it kind of, I think there are some people that got the idea or the negative idea that it was making it look a lot easier than it was.
Right.
Yeah,
You know-
I can see that.
Yeah, I could see that more. I didn't look at it from that point of view, where seeing it in 3 hours, to the layman that maybe doesn't get this 3 hours is possible because of the accumulation of
Exactly.
8, 10, 12, 20
Right.
years. There
Yeah.
could be a devaluation involved there. But
I think-
equally, having watched it, you know, they do the interviews and like, oh, I've been a bladesmith for X years, I've been doing it for every day of my life for 20 years. And, you know, I thought they were very good at portraying that, not portraying, they're very good at allowing the makers to explain that side in the little mini interviews as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was, I enjoy it the few times that we do watch TV and I do watch it. I think it's a good setup.
What a really interesting thing that's happening now is because they're in season 10, you're getting people that are going on the show now that have grown up watching it as kids. So you're getting people that are going on the show and they're 19, 20 years old, and they started making blades when they were 12 when they first started watching Forged in Fire. And that's pretty neat. You're seeing a lot of guys that are going on the show and they're saying things like, I've grown up watching this.
You've been introduced to the craft because of it. That's cool.
And so really, there have been some people that have started knife making because of that show that are now making some really amazing knives. Yeah. You know, so again, I think it's really hard to argue the point now that it's been any kind of a real negative. But I think there for a while there was kind of this idea about the misrepresentation of the craft. Yeah.
Do you think it's something that could be repurposed into other crafts as well?
I do, yeah. I really think that there could be shows in that regard around woodworking or leather woodworking and leatherworking and other parts of metalworking. You know, when the casting call went out for season 10 this year, they specifically asked for woodworkers.
All right.
Because apparently in this upcoming season, they're going to do something with teams. And so they were putting together teams where you had a blade maker, a woodworker, and like a fabricator. So they're doing something different this year, and they're bringing in some other crafts this time. So that could be really interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, that'll be good. I look forward to that.
And you know, one thing you guys are doing, you're going to people's shops and recording a show, right? And one of my favorite parts of Forged in Fire is the part where you get to see the maker's shops.
Yeah.
You know, that last part of the show where you get to see them doing their stuff in their shop. That is my absolute favorite part of the show because I'm always looking to see, we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it in different ways with different tools.
Yep.
And so I love that part. And I've always thought, man, someone should come up with a show where that's what they're doing. They're just going to different makers' shops. You know,
that's exactly what we've been talking about for years, you know, and that's part of the reason to do this tour, to build the following and the awareness to such that we can monetize in a way that, like, Kate and I would love to have a camera guy here.
Yeah.
You know, we're sitting down doing a podcast, but the rest of the day is just go build something.
Yeah.
Let us film it. You know, because the videography in itself is, yes, it's so accessible because we can all pull out our phone, but good cinematic videography, like the documentary we produced a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's not just like me and my phone, like, get content.
That sells.
Yeah.
That sells stuff when it's just so, and you can...
It's still like honest. It's still an honest representation of the maker. It's not like just staged or whatever,
right.
You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that is the lofty and final form of We Are Makers. Would be like 3-4 times a week episodes of just in people's shops, because I think that's fascinating. And I also think it gives it gives the buyer, and this is the thing I'm passionate about, is it gives the buyer a realisation of what goes into the product. Not just the time, but look at the tens of thousands of pounds of machinery that we've got sat around us now. And that all comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And that's what the product pays for.
Yeah, it's 20 years to gather all the tools together that I've got, you know. I mean, it takes a while.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So one thing that seemed to get you quite a lot of popularity in the early days that we were talking about earlier was going back to the induction welding. And you've professed yourself, you weren't the inventor of this kind of forging, you know, other people are doing it. But you've done a lot of documentation and in many ways giving back to the community. How important do you think that was, both for you, or in 3 ways, for you, for the community, for people to be doing that, and for other people to be doing that and giving back in the community?
So one of the first books I read as a knife maker was a book by a guy named Wayne Goddard, and it was called The $50 Knife Shop. And it was a collection of articles that he had written in Blade magazine over the years about how to put together a knife shop with very little money. But he had this way of writing that was real easygoing and instructional and just kind of like, hey, if I can do this, you can do this. And that kind of methodology stuck with me right off the bat. You know, that kind of DIY style book that he put together, showing anybody can do this with very little resources. You know, this is how I did it. And so that's kind of been in the back of my mind whenever I come across something like the induction forge. I know how helpful this machine is to me. So I know it's going to help other people. And, you know, I mean, to be honest, if I can write an article that's helpful, then that is also someone else that's coming to my website where I sell my other things, you know. And I'm not saying the reason I made the Induction Forge website was to drive sales, but it is a nice byproduct, you know. But when I experienced induction forging for the first time, it was so fast and so efficient and so clean, you know. And, you know, we're here in Mississippi. And in July, it is not fun running a propane forge out here.
Oh, I can imagine.
But the induction forge doesn't generate any external heat. And so it was a lot more comfortable too. And so there were just so many benefits out of using that machine that I couldn't help but say, hey, you all out there in the community, you need to look at this machine. It is super, super helpful in all of these ways. And so I was doing that on my stories. You know, I was showing the machine on my stories a lot. And to be honest, I was getting tired of answering all the same questions over and over and over.
Yeah.
And so the webpage came out of common questions on social media. That was the first reason to do the webpage, was just, hey,
an
look,
FAQ.
I can just point you to a website and, you know, and it'll give you what you need, rather than us here having a 30-minute thumb war on our phone, you know.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing. And then as I used it and I ran into issues with it or made modifications to how I use it and I documented those, I thought, hey, this is going to be helpful for someone else that wants to do it too. And so now I've got this guide that's pages and pages long that shows you exactly what to buy, where to buy it, how much it costs, and here's the problems you might run into, and here's how you fix them, and here's a bunch of useful links. And, you know, and so I've tried to make it the Bible of induction forging, and it's become that. I don't know of another resource that's as comprehensive, not to brag about it, you know, but just I don't know of another resource that's that comprehensive for that particular machine. And so I'm hoping that other people who are experts in other areas with other types of machines take the hint and document their stuff, because there's other people doing out there that I would like to duplicate. And it would be really nice if they had a really nice, easy web page to do it. And I think there's still this idea that web pages are complicated, you know, that it's hard to put a web page up, you know, and
it's gotten a lot
better.
Yeah.
You
We
know?
talked about Squarespace last night, didn't we? And it's drag and drop now.
It's super easy. And when being an IT guy, even 15 years ago, websites weren't a barrier for me. I was able to write my own website with Notepad, you know, and that was fine. And so I've been around that. But now the barrier of entry for anybody to start a website is so low that I think as maker communities, we should take advantage of that and do this kind of documentation, you know.
Yeah. And that, again, looping back to the social media side, that's why it's so important to have such a good social media presence to push people towards that website, isn't it? Just to direct them straight there.
Right. I think that's the way makers should have their stuff set up now. I say that because this is the way I do it, but it's worked so well to have your own website separate from social media, whatever platform you choose, you know, have a website that's not Facebook, that's not Instagram, that's not, you know, Etsy, you know, have your own website and then use all those other platforms, every other platform, to point back to the website, you know. That's the way to go.
Yep, couldn't agree more. That's exactly how we set it up. 99% of the people that we've spoke to set up that way. There is always the people that still do it through Etsy, but the reality is, as you've said, like setting up a website is so easy.
Etsy is wildly popular for some people and extremely successful for some people. And I've tried it and it didn't work for me.
It didn't work for me at the time either.
I don't know what the secret is there to Etsy, especially to somebody that's starting Etsy now. I think if you started Etsy 5 years ago, you're probably killing it right now.
Yeah, because Etsy's got its own algorithm within itself, to my understanding.
Yeah.
Like certain people do
to show up on the first page of Etsy, I don't know what you got to do, but if you're showing up on the first page of Etsy, chances are you've been out there a while, you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard to compete with those first pagers on Etsy.
Well, that's it. Everyone wants to find something quick. Find it quick, and then buy it quick, and that's it. Which is what I was saying to you this morning. The Instagram looks like it's now introducing a buy within the app. So, because ultimately it's all down to people clicking as little as possible. Every time someone clicks, there's less chance they're going to get to the end of it. Whereas buying in app, that seems to be the one. So you're all set up to sell through your website. You ship pretty much worldwide?
Pretty much. I'm expanding the countries I ship to, and up until about a year ago, I pretty much just said U.S. only, just because the few times where I was getting inquiries from overseas, it would end once I said, hey, it's going to cost $50 to ship.
Yeah.
You know? But I still get occasionally, I get requests and people are willing to do that. And so I've put flat fees for each country. And as I get a request, I'll add that country and add the whatever the flat fee is for that country. Some countries change a little bit, higher or lower than others. But, as I get a request now, if someone from Brazil contacts me and says, hey, will you ship a steak turner down here? I ask for their address. I do an estimation for the cost. And then I set that as a country on the web store with a general baseline price. Yeah. And because I know what my boxes are, I can kind of set that as a flat rate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That working into box sizes, I think, is good key.
It's good planning.
Yeah, good planning, good key advice for maybe other makers out there. So we talked a bit about the sort of community aspect of bladesmithing. What's your view on like collaborations, collaborating with other makers? Is it anything you've ever dabbled in?
I've done a few tool trades with people,
Trading
where
seems to be a thing here.
Trading's a big thing here, yeah.
Yeah, where someone else has a good social media following, and I've done it with some people that have similar sized social media. I've done it with people that have smaller and larger,
Yeah.
But a lot of times it seems like we're already friends on Instagram, and it's like, hey, I really like that. Do you want to trade a hammer for a hammer, or a steak turner for a bottle opener, or whatever, and I've done trades like that. I have not done many collaborations where I work on a part and send it to someone else and they finish it. I'm trying to think if I've done that at all. I'm sure I have, but I just can't remember it. But not much in that regard. I don't have anything against doing that.
Yeah.
I'd be open to doing that for sure.
And what do you think it could look like if you were to do that? Would it be one of your products reimagined, or
so
do you think totally different?
In the metalwork community, I could see someone else who say is really good at making a certain kind of Damascus billet with a certain kind of pattern. They could send that to me, and then I could forge that into something.
Nice.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That could be that happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then I have had someone buy a hammerhead from me, and they wanted to do the handle. They wanted to do their own spin on the handle. So I've done that a couple of times.
Yeah. The Damascus one would be nice because that's another layer that maybe not a lot of people are aware of in smithing, is the people that make the material for you to then go and forge.
Right.
That's a whole other world in itself,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Like multi-sheet or box tin box, and I know people do it with buckshot and box and forge weld and all that together, and then that coming to you. That's a whole other layer.
Oh yeah, there's a company here in Mississippi. A guy named Chad Nichols has Nichols Damascus. That's all he does.
Nice.
Really?
He makes Damascus for knife makers and other industries. But yeah, he's He is full on into Damascus production, sending it all over the world.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It just does go to show you though that there is an opportunity in anything if you're good at it. Just build that following and go for it. What about the future of it? We've talked at the moment. You're really happy doing this as a side thing, which I think's amazing in itself. That you're happy this just being a side hustle, as it were, a hobby business, because you're happy in your work. What does the future look like? Do you think you'd keep it that way?
I think I'll always keep a certain product line going, which will be kind of a bread and butter, keep the lights on kind of product line to keep a cash flow coming into the business. But I have some definite ideas of areas that I'd like to branch out into in forging that I haven't done much of. Okay. And so like I spoke to an interior design class this week, showing them different examples of forged texture that can be used, inside homes, in different areas, metal finishes and things like that. And some of the things that I took were pictures of work of people that are making like forged furniture, solid steel with mortise and tenon joints, really industrial looking furniture. And that I've got all the equipment to make that kind of stuff, that heavy kind of forging. I guess modern forging or modern art type forging. I'd like to get into more of that in the future. Okay. Get away from some of the small stuff and do some
bigger stuff.
My shop is not really set up like a modern fabricator place where you've got big areas to do huge layouts.
As you can tell,
to do big layouts. I don't have a huge 12-foot table to lay out a big railing or something on, but maybe kind of a sculpture kind of area.
Yeah. So do you think that would involve extending the shop to do stuff like that?
Not necessarily. Okay. I think I could do, like in this area we're sitting here, I could do kind of the size project that I'm thinking of. I've done one. I can take you guys on a trip around Clinton today and show you. Cool. But there's in our town, in the downtown area, the logo for the city has a bicycle in the logo. Yeah. And so they did a call out to local artists over the last few years for these art bicycles. So on the corner, on a lot of different corners in downtown, there's a bicycle that has the wheels are up like wings of a butterfly, and they're stained glass in the wings, and then I did a bike that's near the train station where I took a lot of the railroad spikes that I use and forged them into a bunch of fancy shapes and filled in the frame of a really cool old bicycle.
Nice.
With all that forge work and put it there. And that was a fun project because it was something completely different than I'd done. And so I really liked that, and that's what I'd like to do more of, that kind of work, Yeah,
that sounds like quite interesting work as well. It allows you just to maybe push the boundaries.
Yeah, just let your imagination run.
Yeah. I like it.
And do you feel your shop's as set up as it needs to be now to do anything like that? It feels like you're really well tooled up at the moment.
Yeah, so the first year of the business, every bit of the profit went right back into tools.
Nice.
Like 100%. And most of the second year as well, buying more power hammers and a fly press, and so I dumped a lot of the money right back into the shop. I'm at the point now where I don't really, obviously I would love a 300-pound Chambersburg hammer.
Yeah.
But you build buildings around those kinds of hammers.
Yes.
And so I don't have room for something like that, and the work I'm doing doesn't demand that tool. So I have wants.
Yeah.
But I don't have any real needs right now from a tooling perspective. I'm pretty well set up with what I need. But like we said, it's taken 20 years to get there. And so over those 20 years, I have obtained tools, used them, and let them go as I found they didn't work
for you.
And so the tools that I have now, they all have a purpose. They all function in my process, and I'm pretty happy with how they're all set up.
Yeah.
That's a good setup.
Is that something you would recommend maybe other smaller makers to just plough into it for the first year, 2 years, get set up? Is that really what's allowed you to grow from there?
I think personally that's a better bet than going to get a loan.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, there's an inherent risk when you go, if you're going to start a business, if you go and grab a loan to get a bunch of expensive equipment, you better have a really solid plan to pay that off, or you're going to get in trouble. Whereas if you just take your time, and as you make things and as your business grows, if you have the luxury of reinvesting that back into equipment, I think it's the smart thing to do. You know,
Yeah, I would agree.
It'll pay for itself fairly quickly. And nearly every piece of equipment in here I can point at and say, that machine makes me money in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
know? Or it saves me time in this way.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a reason for all your tools.
Right.
And that's kind of the risk of I say it's the risk. The risk is inherently in what you do with the loan. The large sum of money, we've noticed a few times that, and for better or for worse, people have just gone out and bought what they thought they've needed.
Right.
Rather than being like, hammer at it as hard as they can and be like, right, now I've made enough and I could really do with a fly press.
Absolutely.
Or if I bought that.
Yeah.
But there is always maybe the risk, I hope I'm not talking unfairly, there's always the risk if you've got a large lump of money in front of you, that you do go on a bit of a spending spree, or you maybe get something just a wee bit better than you needed, and actually you end up blowing the budget or spending too much.
Yeah, especially if you, and I'm not saying that this is the right way to do it, and I'm not tooting my own horn, so to speak, but I didn't have a piece of power forging equipment for 15 years. So my first power forging equipment was a small fly press, and then it was a small power hammer, neither of which I have anymore. I've sold and upgraded to different tools, but I worked by hand for 15 years before I got any power forging equipment. By the time I got that power forging equipment, I could tell right away pretty quickly whether or not it was powerful enough or big enough, you know, for what I wanted to do. Whereas if someone handed me a lump sum of money when I was just starting out, I probably would have bought the wrong equipment.
Right.
You know, just because I thought I knew what I needed back then, but maybe not, you know, and I think there's some merit in growing into the equipment.
Yes,
you know,
as
your skills grow. And, you know, there's this idea of, you know, paying your dues. Like, oh, this guy, he bought a 300-pound power hammer his first year he was trying. That's not fair. You know, I understand that sentiment, you know, but the other part of that is someone that's just starting out, if you hand them that kind of tool, they're probably going to wreck a lot of steel, you know, and they might hurt themselves, you know, because there's just a lot of knowledge that you gain over time.
Did you just teach yourself, or was it?
No, well, to some degree, but I've taken classes for a lot of the tools. I've taken power hammer tooling classes and blacksmith classes, you know, but there is something to getting some miles under the belt before you go and invest in big equipment, just because I think you'll spend that money wiser after having some of that expense. Some of that experience.
Yeah,
you know?
It also feels like, certainly in this craft, and many others, but certainly in this craft, you could hide a lot of bad habits with a power hammer or with, you know, or a big fly press, that, like the way material moves. Material moves a lot harder, and you need to move it a lot more purposeful, I would imagine, under a hammer when you're doing the swinging.
Right.
Whereas if you're under a power hammer, it just feels like you could just kind of have at it and see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's also a very fair point to make on the basis of. So you also talked about your wheel hammers as well, and you built them as part of a class, didn't you? What do you think that gives you from a point of view of maybe a mechanical sympathy, an understanding of the tool, and it feels like they were quite a community build project as well.
Oh yeah, it's an event. Yeah, it's an event, and I've attended those classes 4 times and brought 3 hammers home. I attended the last time, I just went just to hang out.
Nice.
You know, just to go and see like-minded people. And because I had been through the class, I knew I could help, you know, and it's fun. You know, I'm going to go back again.
You probably learn something new maybe every time you go.
I don't have a need for another tire hammer, but it's just fun. But yeah, the big advantage of building those in the class setting is, one, you see from beginning to end how that tool goes together. So you know 100% how to maintain it.
Yes.
You know, and to keep it running.
Yep.
And you completely understand it. You have an appreciation for it too. You helped build that thing. And in my experience, things that you put effort into like that, you appreciate a little more than the things that you just lay money out for. Not to say that you don't appreciate the things you buy, but there's a different kind of appreciation that goes into things when you build them. And
knowing that if you broke it, you couldn't just go and buy another one.
Right.
You'd have to invest another week of your time into making it, or however long the class was.
And then the community part is huge, in that when you go to one of those build classes, you join a small community of all the people that build the hammers together, and you have that camaraderie that you gain from camping out for 2 nights together there and building those things and eating together and building together and sweating and working together and all that. But you also join a much larger community of all the people that have that kind of tire hammer. In particular, on Facebook, there's a group called the Clay Spencer Tire Hammer Owners Group.
Nice.
And so when you build one of those, or you buy one of those and you bring it in your shop, you join that community, whether you like it or not. You're a part of that community, and everybody helps each other out. You know, it's like, my hammer is making this funny sound. Here's a video. They post that video out to that group, and instantly, you know, dozens of people jump in and say, "Oh, I had that happen. This is what the problem is."
Brilliant.
You know, and so that's invaluable.
Yeah.
From a support standpoint, you instantly join a massive support community.
Yeah.
So
is that something you think you could move into doing in the future, providing classes and providing education back?
So one of the reasons I have so many tire hammers, not the fact that I just love them, but is that I hope to one day be able to set up to teach basically a power hammer class. Nice. Where I can have multiple students and teach them how to use a power hammer and how to use tooling under the power hammer, how to make tooling with the power hammer, you know, because one of the best classes I ever attended was a tire hammer tools class, where we got together and over a couple of days made a bucket full of tools using the tire hammers, you know. So that was one of those classes where I came home and realized that I was scratching the surface of what could be done with those machines, you know.
And doing a course like that not only allows you to experiment further and get the enjoyment, but you can pass the skills on, isn't it? And that's the important bit.
Yep.
Well, I think you've got it nailed, quite frankly. I think it's a great shop. I'm amazed at what you can put out in the size. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And now I get to pass over to...
my
last... Is there anything else you want to cover while we're here?
I can't think of anything. It's been a joy to talk to y'all and have you here.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I get to pass over to the wife.
Yeah, one last question for me is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oof. What advice would I give younger Derek? One of the most valuable lessons that blacksmithing has taught me, and I'm not sure that this didn't just come with a bit of age, is the importance of failure. You know, in blacksmithing, I think in particular, you know, you have to follow an order of operations. You have to move the steel this way to get it to this way to have this final result, you know. And so you can do all this work and then at the end realize that you skipped a step or you can go just too far and ruin a piece after a tremendous amount of work at the anvil. And so failure has this real visceral, make you want to throw the hammer across the shop kind of feeling. But it's the only way that you really learn, and early on, that failure really just made me want to quit, and it was very aggravating. And so now when I fail at something, it's much more of a, I won't do that again. And it's like a learning experience, and it's almost a pleasurable thing because, hey, that's something valuable that I learned, where early on I treated failure much more of just an anger inducing thing, and instead of learning from it, I just get angry and frustrated, And so I think if I had to go back in time and tell my younger maker self something, it would just, be patient with yourself. Yeah. This is a marathon. Oh. It's not a sprint. Yeah. You're not going to get there in 2 years. You're not going to be making super quality stuff in 3 years, really. You're looking at 20 years, Derek. So hold your horses a little bit and just enjoy the ride, So
I think that's good advice.
Perfect advice, yeah.
I think it's really good advice.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact this is probably the perfect workshop to be frustrated in, with hammers and hammers and everything.
Yeah, I've used that joke a lot that in my IT career, sometimes, it's frustrating dealing with frustrated end users who are angry at their technology, and it's my job to fix it for them. And so some days at the end of the day, it's really nice to grab a hammer and just really wail on something. That is satisfying.
Yeah.
Well, Derek, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Much. Thanks again so much to you and your whole family for having us.
Yeah.
And for us being able to brave out the storm last night in your lovely house. That was great.
Too bad we couldn't have captured some of that
on
the podcast.
I know. What with me going, what's this?
Kate in full fetal position. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Right, let's wrap it up at that. Thanks again. Really
thank you.
it.
Thank you very much.